What would you do if a simple joke, a single moment of sitting next to a stranger awakened something that had been dormant in the universe for 10,000 years? Lyra Vanthos had never believed in destiny, had laughed at the old prophecies her grandmother whispered about on cold nights beneath 3 moons, had rolled her violet eyes every time someone mentioned that humans might be more than the primitive newcomers everyone assumed they were. But destiny, as it turns out, doesn't require your belief to come crashing into your life and change everything you thought you knew about yourself, about the stars, and about the lonely young human who was about to become the most important person in her existence. The cafeteria of Nexus Station 7 was loud that evening, filled with the chatter of 100 different species sharing meals, trading gossip, and arguing over docking fees. Lyra sat in her usual corner with her 3 closest friends, Mira, 7, and talks, all of them Valari like her, their pointed ears twitching with amusement as they watched the humans who had recently arrived on the station. Humans were fascinating in a way that most Valari found embarrassing to admit. They were so young as a species, barely 1,000 years into their spacefaring existence, and yet they had spread across 3 sectors with a determination that was almost unsettling. They were loud, emotional, unpredictable, and completely oblivious to the ancient currents of energy that flowed through the universe. Most species avoided sitting near them simply because their emotional output was so chaotic, like static on an otherwise clear frequency. "Lyra, I dare you," Mira whispered, her silver eyes gleaming with mischief as she nodded toward a table where a single human sat alone, reading something on a datapad while picking at what looked like a truly sad excuse for a meal. "Go sit next to him. Strike up a conversation. See how long you can last before his emotional noise gives you a headache." Lyra glanced at the human and felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. He was unremarkable by most standards, brown hair that fell slightly too long across his forehead, tired eyes that suggested he worked too many shifts, and a posture that spoke of someone who had grown accustomed to being overlooked. His uniform marked him as a technician, probably someone who spent his days in the maintenance tunnels keeping the station running while everyone else lived their lives above him. Something about his loneliness resonated with her in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. "That's it? Just sit next to him?" Lyra asked, forcing her voice to sound bored. "That's barely a challenge. Then you won't mind doing it," Tox replied, his grin revealing sharp canines. "Unless you're afraid that human emotions are too intense for you, that did it." Lyra had never been able to resist a challenge, a fact her friends knew entirely too well. She pushed back from her table, straightened her fitted silver tactical jacket over her black pants, and walked toward the human with the kind of confident stride that suggested she owned every room she entered even when she didn't. The human didn't notice her approach. He was too absorbed in whatever he was reading, his brow furrowed in concentration, his lips moving slightly as he worked through something complicated. It was only when she dropped into the seat directly beside him, close enough that her arm nearly brushed his, that he startled and looked up. And that's when everything went sideways. The moment their eyes met, Lyra felt something shift inside her chest, a resonance, deep and ancient, like a bell that had waited millennia to ring. Her breath caught, her pupils dilated. Her heart, which typically beat in the slow, measured rhythm of her species, suddenly accelerated to match his. She heard him gasp, saw his datapad slip from suddenly nerveless fingers, watched his eyes go wide with an emotion she couldn't read because she was too busy trying to process what was happening inside her own body. Light erupted between them. Not visible light, not exactly, but something that every being in the cafeteria felt simultaneously, a pulse of energy that rippled outward like a shockwave, rattling dishes, flickering lights, and causing every head to turn in their direction. Lyra tried to stand, tried to put distance between herself and this impossible human, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Her hand, moving entirely of its own accord, reached out and found his, their fingers interlacing with a rightness that made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. What the human managed, his voice rough with shock. "What's happening?" "I don't know," Lyra whispered, and for the first time in her adult life, she was truly afraid. She could feel him inside her head, not his thoughts exactly, but his emotions, the surprise and fear layered over something older and deeper. A loneliness so profound it made her chest ache, a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as insignificant as he'd always believed. And beneath all of that, buried so deep he probably didn't even know it was there, she felt something else. Power, ancient and vast and waiting. Your hand, he said, staring down at where their fingers were joined. It's glowing. She followed his gaze and felt her heart stutter. Her skin, which had always carried the subtle luminescence common to all Velari, was blazing with golden light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. No, not her heartbeat. Their heartbeats. Somehow, impossibly, their hearts had synchronized. We need to leave, she said, forcing herself to think through the shock. Now, before what? A new voice demanded, and Lyra looked up to find Station Security Chief Braxton looming over them, his forearms crossed over his chest and his compound eyes glittering with suspicion. Before you explain what in the 12 hells just happened. The next hour was a blur of interrogation rooms and medical scanners and increasingly alarmed conversations conducted just outside her hearing range. Lyra sat on a cold examination table while doctors from 3 different species ran tests. She didn't understand. And through it all, she could feel him, the human, whose name she'd finally learned was Marcus Chen, sitting in a room somewhere nearby. His confusion and fear echoing through their inexplicable connection like ripples in still water. The bond is genuine, one of the doctors finally announced, his voice carrying the weight of someone delivering news they wish they didn't have to give. I've only read about this in historical texts. It's called a resonance link, a phenomenon that hasn't occurred in over 10,000 years. A resonance link, Chief Braxton repeated flatly. The thing from the children's stories. The legendary connection between the architects and their human counterparts during the first expansion. Not a story, the doctor replied. History. The architects, the ancient Velari who first explored this galaxy, they discovered that certain humans possessed dormant capabilities that could only be awakened through deep psychic bonding with Velari sensitives. Together, these pairs could access abilities that neither could achieve alone. They built the gates that connect our sectors. They ended the silent war. They were, for 3 centuries, the most powerful beings in known space, and then they vanished, another doctor added quietly. Every last one of them. No one knew why. No one knew if the gift would ever resurface. Lyra's mind was racing. She had heard these stories as a child, tales of legendary heroes who moved through the stars like gods, who could sense threats across light years, who built the impossible technologies that still powered their civilization today. She had always assumed they were myths, exaggerations, the kind of stories people told to make their history seem more interesting than it was. But now she could feel Marcus in her mind, could sense his presence like a second heartbeat in her chest. And she knew with absolute certainty that the stories had been true. All of them. What does this mean? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. What happens now? The doctor exchanged a nervous glance with Chief Braxton before answering. We're going to need to run more tests. This discovery will change everything. The political implications alone are staggering. If the resonance abilities can be recreated, controlled, harnessed, she's not a weapon, a voice interrupted. And Lyra turned to find Marcus standing in the doorway. His expression, hard despite the fear she could feel radiating through their bond. He had pushed past 2 security officers to get there, and even now they were trying to pull him back. And neither am I. You're talking about us like we're tools, like we're something to be studied and used. Did anyone think to ask what we want? Something warm bloomed in Lyra's chest, gratitude and surprise and the first stirrings of genuine respect. She had expected the human to be overwhelmed, to defer to the authorities, to accept whatever was happening with the passivity that so many species ascribed to humanity. Instead, he was standing up for both of them, demanding to be treated as a person rather than a specimen. She liked him for it. Mr. Chen, Chief Braxton said with strained patience. You don't understand the significance of, then explain it to me, Marcus cut in. But explain it to both of us together, and stop treating us like we're problems to be solved. It took another hour of argument before they were finally allowed to be in the same room. And even then, they were surrounded by monitors and watched by a dozen observers who tracked every flicker of energy that passed between them. But for the first time since that impossible moment in the cafeteria, Lyra felt like she could breathe. His presence calmed her in a way she couldn't explain. The chaos of his emotions, which should have been overwhelming, instead felt like music, complex and sometimes discordant, but undeniably alive. So, Marcus said quietly, settling into the chair beside her, I guess nice to meet you is a bit of an understatement at this point. Despite everything, Lyra laughed. It bubbled up out of her before she could stop it. genuine and surprised, and exactly what she needed. "I was supposed to sit next to you as a joke," she admitted. "My friends dared me. They thought your emotions would give me a headache, and instead, we apparently became some kind of legendary power couple from ancient history." He shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "My day was going so normally until about 2 hours ago. I was going to finish my shift, heat up some leftover noodles, and watch terrible entertainment vids until I fell asleep. Very exciting stuff, that sounds." Lyra paused, searching for the right word. "Peaceful, lonely," Marcus corrected gently. "It sounds lonely," which it was. "I came to this station because I thought it would be an adventure, you know? Travel the stars, meet incredible alien species, do something that mattered. Instead, I spent 3 years crawling through maintenance tunnels while everyone else lived their lives. I was starting to think maybe I just wasn't meant for anything more than that." Through their bond, Lyra felt the truth of his words, the quiet desperation he had hidden even from himself. The dreams he had given up on, the hope he had buried so deep it had almost stopped breathing. It hurt to feel it. It hurt because some part of it resonated with her own unspoken fears. "I know what that's like," she found herself saying. "Everyone thinks I'm confident, that I love being the center of attention, that I'm exactly where I want to be. But most of the time, I feel like I'm performing a version of myself that I invented because I didn't think anyone would like the real me. The me who's afraid. The me who doesn't have all the answers. The me who sits up at night wondering if any of it matters." Marcus looked at her, really looked, and she felt his perception of her shift. He wasn't seeing the beautiful Valari woman with the silver hair and the luminescent skin anymore. He was seeing her. "Sounds like we're both pretty good at hiding," he said softly. Before Lyra could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights pulsed. Security officers rushed past the observation window with weapons drawn. Chief Braxton burst through the door, his expression grim. "We have a problem. Word of your bond has already leaked. A Syndicate warship just dropped out of hyperspace, and they're demanding we turn both of you over to them immediately." Lyra's blood ran cold. The Syndicate was a criminal organization that spanned half the galaxy, ruthless and resourceful, and absolutely willing to do whatever it took to acquire power. If they got their hands on a genuine resonance pair on the power that she and Marcus might one day be able to wield, there was no limit to the damage they could cause. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, and Lyra was impressed by how calm his voice remained despite the fear she could feel screaming through their bond. "Minutes," Braxton replied. "Maybe less. The station's defenses won't hold them for long, and even if they did, we don't have the firepower to win a direct engagement. Our only option is evacuation, but they've got ships blocking every exit vector." "Not every exit," Marcus said slowly. "There's an old cargo tunnel that connects to a decommissioned hangar on the station's underside. I found it during a maintenance check 6 months ago. It doesn't show up on any current schematics because it was sealed off after a hull breach that never got properly repaired. If someone could fix the breach, there's a whole section of the station that nobody's using, including 3 ships that were abandoned when their owners couldn't pay docking fees." Hope flickered in Braxton's compound eyes. "Can you fix it?" "Normally, no. It would take weeks and equipment I don't have." Marcus glanced at Lyra, and through their bond, she felt his desperate idea forming, before he even spoke it. But the architects could manipulate energy directly, right? They could repair ships, build gates, reshape matter with nothing but their minds. If the bond is real, if we really have access to even a fraction of that power, we have no idea how to use it, Lyra protested. "We've been connected for less than 3 hours. We could kill ourselves trying to channel that much energy. We'll definitely die if we don't try," Marcus pointed out, and she felt the weight of his certainty pressing against her own doubt. He believed in them. He believed in her. Despite the fear, despite the impossibility of it all, he was willing to bet everything on a connection that had started as a practical joke. She didn't know if she could do what he was suggesting. She didn't know if the power was really there, waiting to be awakened, or if they were both about to make a terrible mistake. But as she looked into his eyes, those tired, hopeful, impossibly brave eyes, she realized that she trusted him. Not because the universe had forced them together, because in the space of 2 hours, he had shown her more of his true self than most people revealed in a lifetime. And he had looked at her true self without flinching. "Okay," she said, and her voice only trembled a little. "Let's go save ourselves." The journey to the cargo tunnel was a nightmare of close calls and narrow escapes. Syndicate soldiers had already begun boarding the station, and their path took them through sections that were supposed to be secure, but clearly weren't. Twice, Lyra felt Marcus pulling on their connection, using her senses to detect enemies around corners before they could be spotted. It was disorienting and intimate and strangely exhilarating, like learning a new dance with a partner who somehow already knew her rhythm. When they finally reached the sealed section, she understood why it had been abandoned. The hull breach was massive, held closed only by emergency force fields that flickered ominously with every power fluctuation. Beyond the transparent barrier, she could see the stars, cold and distant and utterly indifferent to whether they lived or died. "I can feel it," Marcus murmured, standing at the edge of the breach with his eyes half closed. "The energy you Velari talk about, the currents that flow through everything. I never could before, but now it's like someone turned on a light. It's everywhere." Lyra moved to stand beside him, and when she took his hand, the connection between them flared with intensity. She felt what he felt, the vast web of energy that connected every atom in the station, every star in the sky, every living being in the universe. And she felt something else too, the power of the architects, slumbering deep within both of them, waiting to be awakened. "Together," she said, and she felt his agreement pulse through their bond before he could speak the word. They reached for the energy together, their minds moving in perfect sync. And for one dazzling moment, Lyra understood why the architects had been worshipped as gods. Power flooded through her, through them, more than she had ever imagined possible. She felt the damaged hull, understood its structure on a molecular level, and with a thought that was somehow also Marcus's thought, they began to repair it. Metal flowed like water, broken circuits reconnected. The emergency field stabilized, then became unnecessary as the breach sealed itself with a perfection that exceeded the original construction. It should have taken weeks. It took them 90 seconds. When it was over, Lyra found herself on her knees, gasping for breath, her entire body trembling with exhaustion. Marcus collapsed beside her, his hand still clutched in hers, his pulse racing in time with hers. "We did it," he breathed. "We actually did it." "The ship," she managed. "We still need to, I've got that covered," said a new voice, and Lyra looked up to find her friends Mira, 7, and Tox emerging from the corridor behind them, looking battle-worn but alive. "What?" Mira grinned, her silver eyes dancing. "You didn't think we'd let you have all the fun, did we? We swiped a pilot while you two were busy being legendary. Come on, our ride's waiting, and we need to leave before the Syndicate figures out where we went." The escape was close, but an hour later, they were in hyperspace, safe aboard a battered cargo vessel that had no business still flying, but somehow was. Lyra sat with Marcus in the ship's tiny observation deck, watching the streaks of light that marked their passage through folded space. Their friends had tactfully given them privacy, recognizing that whatever existed between them needed room to grow. "Where do we go now?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," Lyra admitted. "Somewhere safe enough to figure out what we can actually do. Somewhere far from the Syndicate's reach. Somewhere." She paused, searching for words to describe a feeling she had never expected to experience. "Somewhere we can learn who we are, together." Marcus turned to look at her, and she felt his emotions flowing through their bond, wonder and fear and hope and something warmer underneath it all. "You know what's strange?" he said. "I've been alone my whole life. Even when I was surrounded by people, I was alone. But right now, sitting here with you, I feel like I finally found something I didn't know I was looking for." Lyra smiled. "And for once, it wasn't a performance. The universe doesn't make mistakes," she said softly, remembering something her grandmother had told her long ago. "It makes connections. Sometimes it just takes 10,000 years to make the right one." She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling his surprise give way to warmth, and together they watched the stars streak past. Somewhere out there, destiny was waiting. Old powers were stirring. Ancient enemies would surely rise. But for this moment, for this one perfect moment, Lyra Vanthos and Marcus Chen were exactly where they were supposed to be. And somehow, that was enough.